Good evening, and welcome to Congressman Bobby Scott's Telephone Town Hall. This event will be an opportunity for you to hear from Congressman Scott and ask him any questions you may have. My name is Austin, and I'm going to be the moderator this evening. If you would like to ask Congressman Scott a question, please hit *3 and you will be added to the queue. Again, that is *3. And if you would like to be added as a subscriber to Congressman Scott's e-newsletter, you can hit *6 at any point in the call to be placed in a separate queue. We have hundreds of people joining us as we speak, and we only have an hour together here tonight, so we just ask that you be mindful of the clock when you ask your question, and please limit yourself to one question so Congressman Scott can get to as many people as possible. Now, before we begin the question and answer portion of the event, I'm going to hand it over to Congressman Scott for some opening remarks. Congressman Scott?
Thank you, Austin. It's good to have everybody on the call. I want to thank everyone for joining this telephone town hall to talk about what's happening in Washington. And as Austin mentioned, please press *3 if you'd like to get added to the queue to ask a question. Now, realize that many people on the call tonight have questions and concerns about what's been happening in the last few weeks, and I share many of those concerns and frustrations. What we have witnessed in the last few weeks from President Trump and Elon Musk and the rest of the Trump administration is nothing short of an assault on democracy and the federal government. They have unleashed chaos and confusion with executive orders and Elon Musk's so-called Department of Governmental Efficiency, or DOGE. Much of what they have done is designed to demoralize and destroy the federal workforce, just like it is written in Project 2025. They're attempting to purge career civil servants who know what they're doing, who have the experience and know what they're doing, with a loyalist to Donald Trump. And the most recent actions are without any apparent legal authority. The pace of action has been relentless and constant. On his first day, President Trump pardoned 1,600 violent criminals who were convicted of crimes resulting from their participation in the violent insurrection on January 6th. People who assaulted police officers protecting the peaceful transfer of power are now free because of President Trump's pardons. Then they announced the hiring freeze of all federal employees and a haphazard firing of other civil servants, including those who kept our airline passengers safe and those working hard to stop the avian flu. These actions are putting the public at risk, and the Veterans Administration, for example, has already had a staffing shortage, and targeting probationary employees only makes things worse. Many of those are positions that have been left open for a long time, and they finally got to fill, and now they're vacant again. They've attempted to freeze all federal grant funding that provides for education, health care, and access to food and public safety. And these are programs that our community relies on every day, like Head Start and community health centers, and investments in the future, like medical research. Then we found out from public reports that Elon Musk had invaded your privacy by accessing personal data in highly confidential systems in the Departments of Treasury, Department of Labor, Department of Education, and others. This information includes Social Security numbers, healthcare information, student loan information, but they won't tell you what they're doing with the information, and that could, because that information could include sensitive information about Elon Musk's business competitors, or sensitive information about investigations about the many federal agencies that are investigating his businesses, particularly OSHA and the NLRB, and he could be using that information for his personal financial advantage. There's no reason for Elon Musk to get all that information, and it begs the question what he intends to do with it. And he says it's all in the name of efficiency. But we know that Musk had a private meeting with the Prime Minister of India. Was that for personal business or what? We have, let's remember that Donald Trump and Elon Musk are claiming that all of this is in the way to reduce the deficit and national debt. Now, that's suggesting that they're doing anything about the national debt is ridiculous. First, public reports indicate that his claimed savings are wildly exaggerated. And just last week, House Republicans made their first moves to pass a new federal budget for the fiscal year that begins on October 1st. We had an 11-hour hearing, and yesterday Donald Trump endorsed the budget they reported. This budget will actually increase the annual deficit and add trillions of dollars to the national debt after they whined incessantly about how bad the debt and the deficit both are. And it betrays the middle class by giving trillions of tax cuts to the top 1% in corporations while cutting services for the middle class. But let's be clear, this Republican budget makes cruel cuts to countless programs that working families depend on. And as ranking member of the Committee on Education and Workforce, I'm particularly offended by cuts being demanded of educational and nutritional programs. The budget means that children and seniors will go hungry, employers will not be able to find the skilled workers they need, and it will make it harder for students to go to college and even harder to pay back student loans. And the budget will rip away health care from millions of Americans by making drastic cuts in Medicaid. All this to fund tax cuts for the wealthy. Time and time again, we've seen trickle-down economics fail to deliver on its promises to the middle class, and there's nothing economically responsible about the new Republican budget. Working families and middle class will pay for even more lavish tax cuts for corporations and billionaires like Elon Musk and Donald Trump. And they have actually been very successful in looking out for themselves. According to published reports, both Elon Musk and Donald Trump have made tens of billions of dollars, maybe hundreds of billions of dollars for themselves just since the election. And we will not be distracted. Let's not be distracted from the fact that amongst all this chaos and confusion, the price of eggs and other goods has been going up. Inflation went up last month despite President Trump's campaign promise to bring costs down on day one. And inflation will only get worse with President Trump's new tariffs, which amount to a new tax on American consumers, and his new policy on immigration, which will also put upward pressure on prices. Now, what can we do about this? Our Constitution provided for checks and balances, and regrettably, the American electorate chose to elect Republicans to control both chambers of Congress, and many Republicans in Congress have supported the chaos, confusion, and corruption lock, stock, and barrel. But congressional Republicans also have a very thin majority. We only need 3 Republicans in the House or 4 Republicans in the Senate to join us to stop this chaos and insanity. Countless lawsuits have been filed, and many have yielded results. And we hope to have a guest who will talk about some of these efforts shortly. And House Democratic leader Hakeem Jeffries introduced the Taxpayer Data Protection Act legislation in response to Elon Musk's unfettered access to highly sensitive personal and business information. And we want to hear from you. Leader Jeffries has launched a new effort to hear directly from the American people harmed by recent Trump administration policies. If you or someone you know has a story you would like to share, please head to the website democraticleader.house.gov/share your story. That is Democratic Leader, all one word, house.gov/share your story, all one word, and let us know how all this chaos has affected you. Now again, please hit *3 if you would like to add a question, and *6 if you'd like to opt in to receive email updates from our office. Now, Austin, how are we doing?
Yes, it looks like we have our guest on with us.
Okay. And so before we begin the Q&A, I'm honored to have Sky Perriman, President and CEO of Democracy Forward. Democracy Forward has filed dozens of lawsuits, many of them totally successful, putting an end to many of the illegal actions by this administration. So, Scott, thank you so much for joining me tonight, and please tell us what you're working on.
Yeah, thanks so much, Congressman, and thanks.
Scott, I think you went on mute.
Looks like we may have lost Sky. Let's see if we can get Sky back on the line, Congressman. In the meantime, let's go to our first question. Our first question is going to go to Tanya from Newport News. Tanya, you are on with Congressman Scott.
Yes, hi, good evening. I was just wondering, I know the last session that Congress had, they didn't vote on anything that pertained to renewing the budget for replacing our residents' SNAP benefits that have been stolen due to the lack of security on the cards. So I was just wondering, have you heard anything of that moving forward? Because I do know that a lot of people have been impacted, and now, unfortunately, we're told that we need to tell them they need to go to the pantry, and, you know, it's hard seeing these families that are on these benefits and not having even resources to give to them.
Well, that's the common problem. It happens all the time. We haven't been able to fix it yet. Some of us are working on it, but quite frankly, it's not a priority with the Republicans. So we're having a little trouble making progress on it. But it is a priority, something we're working on.
Okay.
Thank you, Tanya. Next, we are going to move to Rachel from Newport News. Rachel, you are on with Congressman Scott.
Thanks so much. First, congratulations, Congressman, on being the recipient of our 2024 Champion of Adult Education Leadership Award. So I am an adult educator, and I know that 70% of the funding for adult education services in Virginia comes from the U.S. Department of Education. Can you tell us, what are you seeing in the House budget proposal for adult education and Title II services? Our students and our adult educators across the state are concerned. Thank you so much.
Well, I think anybody interested in education ought to be concerned. The way the budget works is the Budget Committee passes the budget, and they make budget cuts, but the cuts are non-specific. They just identify a number for the various committees to find cuts up to that number. The Education and Workforce Committee has been assigned $330 billion to find cuts in that area. Obviously, with cuts that large, you're not going to see much increase in anything. You'll probably see a lot of cuts in all kinds of education, particularly access to college, maybe school lunches. We're not sure exactly what they're going to try to find $330 billion. But I wouldn't be optimistic about any increase in funding in education because, as I said, they're trying to fund tax cuts for the rich, and it's $4 trillion they're trying to find. And to find that, they have to cut $330 billion out of the Education and Workforce Committee and $880 billion out of Energy and Commerce, which will probably be Medicaid. So we're on the defense, trying to hold the line. But their first priority is massive tax cuts for the rich, and they've got to fund them with cuts somewhere. Regrettably, education is one of their priorities for cuts.
Thank you. Next, we are going to move to Sandra from Newport News. Sandra, you are on with Congressman Scott.
Hi, Congressman Scott. My question is, I want to know how Elon Musk can cut our Social Security, because those are funds that we have paid into.
Well, we don't know right now. He's into the computer system, and he can, if he wants to identify somebody and just reprogram so that you don't get any money, he can identify who he wants to identify. I mean, why he is in the Social Security computer hasn't been explained. That has nothing to do with efficiency, and they won't answer why he has any reason to be in that computer. And so we don't know what he can do. Hopefully, he will not change the program and reduce Social Security payments. But I just don't know what we will find out soon enough. We need three Republicans to sign on to a subpoena so we can get information.
And Rep. Scott, I'm so sorry that my line dropped. This is Sky, but I just would emphasize.
Oh.
Yeah, I'll just emphasize.
Good.
Yeah, I'll just emphasize on that question. We have brought a lawsuit. We have brought a lawsuit about multiple lawsuits against DOJ, but we brought one specifically on the IRS. And then in another lawsuit, we have a judge that has suggested that it might be appropriate to take what we call discovery right against DOJ and to have them answer questions. And we are moving to try to get the court to allow us to do that. So in addition to your efforts and Congress's efforts, I think we will be able to hopefully get some of that transparency and some court orders soon. So we're really concerned about all of this too.
Well, that comes as good news because we haven't been able to get any information. The one value of a lawsuit is you have the opportunity for what's called discovery. That is, you can haul the other side into an office and ask questions under oath to get answers, and he can explain what he's doing in the Social Security computer, in the Department of Labor computer, what he has access to, and what he's doing with the information. So, Scott, do you want to talk about some of the other lawsuits you've got?
Sure. I don't know when my line had dropped. I'm so sorry. So we've brought a number of
right at the beginning.
Oh no! Okay, well, I'm so sorry. I was just talking and no one was hearing me. So, well, thank you again for having me, and I'll just give a preview. You know, number one, we have filed a number of suits, including on day one, but we've continued to file suits against, agencies and DOJ and the attempts to access the personal information on individual Americans. And I'll just, remind everybody a little bit about our history, but our nation did go through a time where there was a president that wanted to access information, personal information on individual Americans, and Congress said absolutely not. And that was in the Watergate era, and Congress passed the Privacy Act, which protects all of us from unreasonable intrusions into our personal data. And so you'll see a number of lawsuits that we have brought, but that also others have brought to try to enforce those privacy rights, as well as a range of other laws that we believe they're violating. We were able to successfully stop the federal funding freeze that they sought to implement, which was really something that could harm everybody. I mean, it's not a funding freeze. It was really an essential services freeze, and it stopped or threatened to stop everything from Head Start to Meals on Wheels to a number of services that communities across the country in both red states and blue states, all of us rely on. And we were able to get a nationwide order forcing the administration to stop that, and we're still in court on those issues. The administration has taken a range of steps to really undermine our ability and people's ability to think and speak freely. They have issued 2 anti-DEI orders, which certainly tries to send a wrecking ball to progress on civil rights. But even beyond that, these are orders that are really seeking, they're chilling people's speech and the ability of teachers and educators and many others to engage in dialogue. And so we've brought a suit against that in Maryland and had a hearing this week in federal court, and we're waiting for the court to rule there. They have overreached with respect to their immigration policy. The AGs and many other organizations brought a suit against the ACLU brought one of these suits against his attempts to rewrite the Constitution and to question birthright citizenship, which multiple judges have said is unlawful. But we've also had to bring a suit because they want to send ICE into houses of worship, into churches across the country. And so we're representing a range of religious communities in federal court there. I don't know if I dropped off before I said this, but one of the main things to know is that, the courts are really a front line in this work. And federal judges who have been appointed by Democrats, who have been appointed by Republicans, federal judges who were appointed by President Trump, have all sort of put the brakes on a number of these administration's activities and harmful policies. And we're going to continue to see, I think, an avalanche of litigation in that respect. And so we were going to continue. I want everyone to know that there are lawyers who are going to fight and work day and night into the wee hours of the morning to make sure that we can protect people and communities in the courts, and also to stop and slow down the unlawful activity that is also harmful, so that people can really make their voices heard in this time. So that's our commitment to you, and we're also just so grateful to what the congressman and all of his colleagues are doing in this time. It's going to take everybody. I'm happy to answer questions about any of the lawsuits or expected lawsuits or any of that throughout. But we really just want you to know that there are folks every day, going into court. We're also taking a range of actions to protect the civil service, public servants who serve all of us. Some of you are public servants who they are targeting. We have a number of lawsuits pending on that, and we will, continue to work tirelessly to ensure that the people that serve our country, the civil servants that serve our country, that we are really having their backs in this time.
Well, thank you so much, Sky, and we'll have questions. I'm sure that you'll be. We'll call on you to answer in just a few minutes. And Austin, you want to call on the next person?
Yes. Next, we are moving to Veronica from Chesapeake. Veronica, you are on with Congressman Scott.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. My question is, what is being done to change about the proposal or the bill to change the Constitution that would allow a president to serve a third term, but excludes the previous president? And will you support presidents serving a third term?
I certainly would not support that legislation that it would allow Trump to serve a third term, but not Obama, George W. Bush, or Bill Clinton. It's in the form of a constitutional amendment. It requires 2/3 vote in the House and the Senate. I can't imagine it getting the 2/3 vote, nor being ratified by 3/4 of the states. So I don't think there's any chance that it might pass. The problem, of course, is that when we get towards the end, whether or not the president will relinquish power to the newly elected president, or whether he'll cancel the election. We don't know what he might do. I think we have to. We're kind of tied up with all of the chaos and confusion right now. But I think it's always been a question that what he meant when he told one group, "If you vote for me this time, you won't have to vote for me again." What he meant by that. I hope he didn't mean you won't be able to vote for me again. But as far as the law is concerned, I don't think there's any chance that the constitutional amendment will pass either Congress or be ratified in time for it to be effective.
Next, we are going to move to Rosetta from Chesapeake. Rosetta, you are on with Congressman Scott.
Hi, good evening, everyone. My question is regarding the lawsuits that have been filed. There have been so many civil service workers that have been released from their jobs for no apparent reason. Why hasn't a class action lawsuit been filed directly against Elon Musk and Doge because they have lost their wages and they have lost their livelihoods? And it seems like this is the only way we will be able to get rid of him is to file this lawsuit.
Let's let Sky answer whether or not individual claims have been made.
Yeah.
I think they have to. There's some process confusion right now. Scott?
Yeah, let me just say, first of all, it is reprehensible what this administration is doing for the very people that serve us. And I just want to say that because I know some of you all are civil servants or have been civil servants, and I think we are all, reeling from this. And we're doing everything that we can in the courts. But yes, the congressman's right. There are some process pieces. So so let me just start with a few things. He sought to sort of summarily dismiss a range of people from USAID and from the CFPB. And in those cases, the decisions that the administration were trying to make actually violate the ability of the agencies to do what Congress told them they have to do. And so we've been able to get into court in those cases, and the courts have put the brakes on while the cases are pending right now, and there'll be more orders coming out, the proposed terminations. With respect to the probationary employees, which I know, you know about, and maybe not everybody. I mean, these are employees that have worked for the federal government for 1 to 2 years, who the president is now just trying to summarily dismiss for no reason. Those we filed last week a class complaint with the Office of Special Counsel, which of course the president tried to fire the Office of the Special Counsel, and the court stopped him from doing that. But we filed a lawsuit with that process, and then the process would be that it would eventually go to the MSPB. There are a range of other lawsuits that are being filed with that board, that specific board, and then there have been some lawsuits filed in the courts directly. So, people are fighting for our civil servants on all fronts in the courts and through the MSPB. There is a website that we and others have launched called Civil Service Strong, civilservicestrong.org, that you can go to for resources and references. And there is a way to sign up, and there is a way to communicate with the lawyers. So if you're not seeing the types of suits that you want to see, one way to sort of make that clear is just to go, write a note, sign up. We can pass it along. And the other thing I should note on DOJ is that there's a number of suits, including one that the state AGs recently brought, the attorneys general from a range of states, that are really after, what is Elon Musk's status? He has, if he's going to be taking all these actions, maybe he needs to be confirmed by the Senate, which is how our laws work. You don't just get to roll in and start, restructuring the entire government without oversight. And so those lawsuits are also pending. So I know that is not satisfying because people are being hurt now, and we are doing everything we can to get the courts and the process to move as fast as it can to try to get some relief. And I appreciate that question.
Now, Scott, one of the challenges we've had is standing. So AGs and labor unions have filed suit, but the courts are having little problems because they are not the correct plaintiffs. Who would be the right plaintiffs in these cases? Would it be the workers themselves?
Well, let me say, first of all, we believe that there's so much unlawful activity. I just want to say this. The courts may not agree with this, but I just want to say it. We believe there's so much unlawful activity that unions should have standing, that individual workers should have standing, and that others that benefit from the government should have standing. So I'll just say that outright. But you are right that some unions have been dismissed because there is a special process for unions. There is also a process for federal employees through the Merit Service Protections Board, the MSPB. And so, many are having to file their cases there first.
Because they have to what's called exhaust administrative remedies.
Correct. That is correct. And I want to be very clear. We believe that this is so outside the bounds. We believe that people should be able to avail themselves, frankly, of any forum. I just want to say that to be very clear. But yes, the conventional wisdom and what many are having to do because of the way the process works is to go through either for the probationary employees, we're going through the Office of Special Counsel and then to the MSPB, or you go straight to the MSPB. And those cases are being filed, and there can be appeals into courts. And then unions are doing everything they can, too, both in the courts and through their other process. So there are just some complications with the way the civil service is structured, that means that some of these cases look a little different. But then in other instances, like with USAID, in those instances, there have been ways that unions and other organizations have been able to proceed with their cases. So I just want to say we believe that there should be standing, frankly, with all of this, because this is so outside the bounds. This is not something that's just, an ordinary personnel dispute, but you are seeing these process issues. That is what you're seeing out in the media, and just know that there are lawyers in all of these forums doing what they can to try to protect the civil service, and that we really need people to be vocal about this. I saw something about, these are civil servants that work in congressional Republicans districts too, and services that all of us rely on, right, wherever we live. And so it's really going to be important that that we all make our voices heard.
Do you know if any cases have been filed on civil rights, color of law, 1983, 1981?
There have been, I believe there was potentially a case even filed yesterday, but on the civil service pieces itself, there are a range of cases that raise, I'll have to sort of check exactly on the 81, 83 pieces, Congressman, but there are many of these actions do disproportionately affect the very communities that the civil rights laws are intended to protect. And so you will see, you'll see a number of those. But I don't know. I don't know specifically on that theory with specifically the civil service. I don't think so yet.
And one of the problems we have in all of this is the first thing that they did was to fire all the inspectors general, which would be the first place you'd go when all this skullduggery is going on. They fired them, and that just makes a lot of things difficult. Austin?
Next, we are moving to Renee from Norfolk. Renee, you are on with Congressman Scott.
Congressman Scott, thank you so much for your service. I'm deeply grateful, and I realize that you don't have a vote as a congressman on the education secretary pick, but as we know, this cabinet is a disaster, and I'm, as a lifelong educator and mentor to so many teachers who are in a state of crisis with their students not coming to school because of ICE raids and in a state of panic, I wonder, what do you think can be done to prevent the confirmation of President Trump's Secretary of Education nominee, and B, how can we protect the Department of Education should she be confirmed? Thank you so much.
Well, the first question, if you look at some of the other nominees, and the FBI director was confirmed, I believe it was today, if you look at some of the quality of nominees that have gotten through, there have been discussions that if Matt Gaetz had not withdrawn himself, he could have gotten himself confirmed, but he withdrew. But if you look at all of the nominees, as undesirable perhaps as the nominee for Secretary of Education she is nowhere close to the shock of some of the other nominees, Defense, Intelligence, FBI, Health and Human Services. So if they're voting for the rest of them, your boys should go to your United States senators. Kane and Warner have been voting right down the line with us, expressing outrage at some of these nominees. So they don't need to hear from you. If you know some Republican senators or have some friends in other states that have Republican senators, that's where the voice ought to go. But I think our representatives in the U.S. Senate know what to do, and they'll do the right thing. In terms of how to save the Department of Education, I assume that one of the problems we have is people have said, why weren't Democrats ready for all of this? We were ready to say on the CFPB, the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, we were ready to protect the rules that Biden had put in place and to make sure they didn't undermine some of those good rules we had in place. We had no idea they would just go in and close the agency without any congressional oversight. It takes congressional action to close the Department of Education, and what they figured, if you fire everybody, there won't be anybody to do the job. We frankly weren't ready for that. I mean, that is so over the top that Sky and other organizations bringing lawsuits to try to fix that. But so long as the people, you have people there doing their jobs, administering the student loan program, administering the Title I, funding for low-income students, IDEA, all of the programs that are administered under the Department of Education, as long as they're being administered, you got enough people in there to administer it. I don't think there's any chance. Well, you know, there shouldn't be any chance that they'll abolish the agency. There were amendments. There have been amendments over the past few years where somebody would propose in a budget to delete all funding for the Department of Education. And you had at least 60 Republicans to vote no. We need 3 of them to hang with us, and that will end any chance that they have to abolish the Department of Education through legislation. Now, what they do with their rogue antics, I can't answer that, but I don't think there's much chance that they can do it through legislation.
Next, we have an online question from Jeffrey. He wants to know, why do Republicans believe that corporations and the top 1% deserve another tax break? They just got one during the first Trump administration.
You'll have to ask them, and well, not only do they want another. Well, actually, a lot of this tax is an extension of the Trump tax cuts. So they expire at the end of 10 years, and so that's what they're trying to extend them. But you'll have to ask them why tax cuts for the top 1% are more important than money for education, money for health care, money for cancer research, money for Veterans Administration. Why that has to be first, and then whatever money you got left, you can fund the rest of government. You'll have to ask them. It makes no sense. As a matter of fact, we found under both Clinton and Obama and Biden that if you have the benefits go to the middle class, they'll spend the money, the economy will do well, and frankly, the rich people their stocks will go up. You don't have to give them tax cuts for them to do well, but there's just it makes no sense to me. It doesn't help 99% of the public, and they just keep coming with tax cuts for the wealthy and want to pay for them with services that are desperately needed by everybody else.
And a reminder to everyone, if you'd like to ask a question, just hit *3 to be added to the queue. And if you want to be added as an e-newsletter subscriber for Congressman Scott, hit *6 and you'll be added in a separate queue. Next, we are going to move to Karen from Hampton. Karen, you are on with Congressman Scott.
Thank you. Hi, Congressman Scott.
Hey.
There are so many issues and questions, but I'm interested to find out if you have any additional information regarding NIH funding will even continue. I am very concerned how the steep change in indirect costs will impact and hamper our universities continuing in science and research across our country.
Congressman, do you want me to start?
Yeah, if you want to do that, and I'll respond after you.
Okay, great. Well, the only thing I was going to say is, and this is a real instructive situation for how they're operating. Their indirect costs, they went out and tried to cap them. There were 2 lawsuits within a few days, and there have been nationwide orders issued saying it was unlawful. The administration has now admitted that that their attempt to cap those rates was unlawful. And so right now there should be orders holding that together. I know the congressman will have more to say on kind of the broader pieces, but this is another example of where they go do things that are harmful, that, by the way, harm everybody. I mean, you heard the people. I mean, they harm red states, they harm blue states, they harm purple states, all of our institutions. And then the minute that you get into court and you call them on it, the courts have to block it and then they back away. So I would say that's a pattern, and it's one of the reasons why it's so important that we do have this frontline legal action while Congress and people and communities are also doing their own, work to stop these things. The second thing I'll say about universities and other funding pieces generally is that they are going to seek to continue to weaponize the government and weaponize federal funding. That is why we have sued on the 2 anti-DEI orders. There was a Dear Colleague letter that came out on Friday, for those of you that are following this, from the Department of Education that puts a lot of funding at risk for both K through 12 and for higher ed. You will see swift legal challenges on that. And so I just wanted to highlight that I think this is another place where they are outside the bounds of the law. The policies are harmful to people, and the courts right now are stopping a lot of that. But I'll turn it to the congressman for the other broader points.
Good. The discussion was indirect costs. When a federal research grant is awarded, they'll add a little bit for indirect costs. When you have a lab, say at Hampton University, there are indirect costs. The university provides support, an office, a laboratory, administrative, and each they calculate what the indirect cost is, and they add that to the award. Now, you can argue whether or not they're too high or too low, but that ought to be done in an intelligent conversation. You don't cut off the grant in the middle of the research, and there's some researchers, halfway finished and they cut off the grant. There are right ways of doing it, and what they're doing is just a wrecking ball without any consideration of efficiency or saving money. Scott mentioned DEI. This administration has had the most direct assault on civil rights of any administration or any group of politicians since the 1960s. Not since George Wallace was getting votes for proclaiming segregation now, segregation tomorrow, segregation forever, and picking up votes with that. Have you had someone just a frontal assault on basic civil rights? When they say diversity, when they're against diversity, well, what are they? They must be for segregation. Now, they have, for example, in doing everything they can to keep people out of schools, they had a provision that requires schools to take any consideration of race from their from admissions, any consideration, even and so far as even if they have a discriminatory standardized test that they require, they say, well, you can't get rid of the discriminatory test, so you can't use affirmative action. A lot of schools had what they knew were discriminatory tests, but they also had affirmative action, which kind of balanced it off. So it was kind of, no harm, no foul. When they got rid of affirmative action, they're looking up at a discriminatory test, one that everybody knows is discriminatory. The guidance from the Department of Education that went out in the last couple of days said you cannot get rid of a test as a way of trying to admit more minorities. Now, I mean, they're kind of telling on themselves. They can have a discriminatory test, but they can't have affirmative action. The attacks on DEI, where they're against equity, they're against inclusion, and they're against diversity. The Supreme Court in 1954 said that segregation of students on the basis of race was inherently unequal. we have to revisit. We got to argue that all over again. Awesome.
Next, we're going to move to Gordon from Norfolk. Gordon, you are on with Congressman Scott.
Thank you very much, and thank you, Congressman Scott, for having this conversation. I would kind of like to approach the concept of DOGE slashing our government offices, specifically in reference to USAID, and how that impacts our soft power in foreign policy, especially in places like Ukraine, in places like Africa, where the people who will step in is either going to be Russia, in Ukraine's case, in a violent military way, or it will be in Africa with China or Russia, who are coming in with deals that aren't really fair to the people there. However, it's taking away our ability to influence foreign policy. We have no soft power left at that point. What is there a plan, I guess, to address that and combat that? Sorry for the length of my question.
Apparently not. And you talk about influence. There's just, before you even get to influence, there's just humanitarian assistance where people are dying. You come in with a little bit of money. Now, people are starving. You come with a little bit of food. Now, one of the interesting things that people are now discovering is all this foreign aid we're sending out is not cash. It's farmers in Kansas selling food to AID, and then the food gets sent over there. If you cut off the assistance, the farmer now just lost one of their biggest customers. And a lot of farmers are wondering, well, whoa, do I plant in going into the summer? Am I going to be able to sell the food? And so, I mean, we're having an adverse effect on a lot of people that they didn't think about. But just the humanitarian part of it, it's a very small part of the budget. And I think just in terms of values, fighting hunger is a value that we ought to be pursuing. Now, the health aid, PEPFAR, the International AIDS Assistance, people think, well, we're helping them. No, we're helping ourselves, because if you let an outbreak of AIDS go in another continent, how long do you think it's going to take to get here? And if we can control it in wherever it's starting off, that helps us. I mean, it's just self-interest. If you've got a disease kicking off, you want to contain it where it is before it gets out of control. And for modest sums of money, we have saved the lives. They're saying 25 million people are alive today because Representative Barbara Lee and President George W. Bush got together and figured out what was needed and provided the AIDS relief. And it has made a difference in other continents, but it has also helped us because we don't have the problem coming into the United States. So a lot of this is self-interest. But, you know, he's getting out of the World Health Organization. How does that help when you have something like COVID? It started in China, and we're not part of the World Health Organization, so we're not going to help contain it wherever things break out. They're cutting back on staff at the Center for Disease Control. While the avian flu is breaking out, I mean, some of these things are dangerous. I mean, he fired the FAA director, and then sent pink slips to everybody in the air traffic control towers. So what are they going to be spending their time focused on? They just, they don't know where they're going to have jobs next month. And you've seen a lot more plane crashes. These people, it's just not people's jobs we're talking about. We're talking about our safety and our security. And you can't just fire people willy-nilly and think the protection we have and the security we have will be there.
We've got time for a few more questions. Next, we are going to move to Robert from Hampton. Robert, you are on with Congressman Scott.
Good afternoon, fellas. Thank you, sir. My question is, how could a private citizen obtain access to U.S. citizens' private information, even though that Privatization Act is in place? How could that happen? I'm talking about Musk.
Well, I'm going to call on Scott, but first of all, nobody has information. People in the Department of Education can't go snooping around at people's private information without a need to know. There are laws guaranteeing privacy, and I'm not aware of any constraint that Musk has. And that's why we need these lawsuits that Sky and Democracy Forward and other groups are filing, so we can find out exactly what they've got access to and what they're doing with the information. Sky, you want to respond?
Yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right. And as I mentioned, there's a range of federal protections that people have for their data that this administration is really running roughshod over, and the Musk and Doge people appear to be doing so. There are cases that have been filed around this in many agencies. Courts have blocked some of the access. In other cases, the courts are saying they're not refusing to block it. They want to hear it, but they are, they're saying that they want to hear it. They don't want to just make a decision overnight on a temporary restraining order, which is a really quick way to get into court. They want to do it on a more considered basis. So, but I will tell you, it is harmful. It is a problem, and there have been so many lawsuits filed to stop them from accessing data, and I think that we will prevail in those. We've seen no court yet say that they think it is okay what the Doge and the administration are doing. In many instances, they are making some procedural decisions early on in the cases, but again, we've not seen a federal court rubber stamp or stamp of approval on anything. And I think that these, just what the congressman said, the lawsuits are really important. And then it's also very important that people really be making their voices heard about how harmful this is. This is not what your opinion is on a tax bill or what your opinion might be on healthcare. This is basic things around people's data, your privacy. It's really important, and it should be beyond politics. And I think it's important that people continue to make their voices heard there. I think the polling shows that, Americans are deeply disapproving of Musk and his efforts in these agencies, which I think is positive, frankly.
And there's another thing that let's not just draw the line at citizens' private information. There is sensitive business information that's in these files that he may be getting access to. I mean, he's got more federal contracts than probably anybody in the country, and he's bidding on contracts. Does he have access to his competitors' bids? Does he have contract to job numbers before they're public?
Yeah, I mean, we're representing small business groups and other businesses in some of the challenges, including at the IRS, because Doe should not have access to competitive business information. No other person on the planet would be able to access their competitors' business information, and that's actually what our complaint says to the federal court. So it's just all the more reason that the challenges are really important.
Thank you.
Next, we're going to move to Nancy from Newport News. Nancy, you are on with Congressman Scott.
Hi, good evening, Congressman Scott. So many people are dependent on Social Security, disability, Medicare, and Medicaid. How concerned should we all be?
You should be very concerned. If you look at the budget, the committee the Energy and Commerce Committee is directed to find $800 and some billion in cuts. It is virtually impossible to find that without going into massive cuts in Medicaid. They estimate probably 1 million people will lose their coverage. So, yeah, you should be worried about it. Now, if we could get 3 Republicans to join the Democrats, we can protect Medicaid from cuts. So it's, I think Democrats are pretty united. It's just that whether or not the Republicans can be united to go after your Medicare and Medicaid. I hope not. Now, people think that Medicaid is mostly low-income children. That's right. Most of the money in Medicaid goes to nursing homes. So we just tell people, Grandma's coming home from the nursing home. Just make room because Republicans are going to cut Medicaid. That's going to be the first thing that's going to happen. And when people need nursing home services, I don't know what most people can't pay. If they can pay going in a couple of years, they've done what's called spin down, so that they qualify for Medicaid, because most people can't afford nursing home care, and that's where Medicaid comes in. So they don't appear to know that, and those that know it don't appear to care. So we just have to find 3 Republicans to join the Democrats in the House, and we can protect Medicaid from cuts.
Looks like we have time for one more question. Heidi from Chesapeake. Heidi, you are on with Congressman Scott.
Hi. Thank you, Congressman. My question actually relates to the court cases. I'm a little concerned. I know we're winning the court cases currently, but what happens when they go up to the higher courts, primarily like the Supreme Court? Because I've seen where cases have gone to the Supreme Court, we think we're going to win, and then the Supreme Court, like the Republican justices, they pull a fast one and do something we never thought they would do. So what happens with these these cases? Do we have a good shot with them?
Scott? Did Sky leave?
Looks like we might have lost Sky again, Congressman. I apologize.
Okay. We don't know, and we just have to take our chances. I think if you just add them up, I think there are 5 votes on the court. You need 5 votes to win that have a real sense of loyalty to the Constitution and to democracy. 3 or 4 of them, it's hard to say, but I think there may be 5 that when you get down to basic democracy, I mean they've had rulings that have just, as you've suggested, have just been bizarre under any interpretation of present law. The case should have gone the other way, and finding president immune from crimes was one of them. I don't know where that came from, but it's gonna. We just have to have faith and see what's going to happen. But the idea that they would rule in such a way that would sabotage basic democracy is, I think there are 5 votes there that would rule in favor of basic democratic process. And by the time you get there, you will have found people who've lost their Medicaid, who have had plane crashes because the air traffic controllers have been fired, who are noticing that the avian flu got out of control because nobody at the CDC was doing their job, that veterans can't get the services they need because you've cut back on, they say they're not cutting back on mission critical. I don't know who is employed at the Hampton VA that's not mission critical. I mean, obviously the doctors and the nurses, But I mean, the food service people are mission critical. Try to run the hospital without food service. Security officers, X-ray personnel, janitorial services. How are you going to run a hospital? Anybody on the payroll is mission critical. And they try to say, well, we can fire a bunch of people and nobody will notice. They will notice. And hopefully the public will have expressed themselves in such a way that people will, that the Supreme Court will have the backbone to rule that we have a democracy and we're not giving it away.
Thank you, Congressman, and thank you to Sky Perryman for joining us tonight. Unfortunately, we are out of time. We had a lot of great questions tonight, and Congressman Scott will be hosting more town halls and telephone town halls in the future. But if you have other comments or concerns, please send a message or sign up for Congressman Scott's e-newsletter by visiting our website at bobbyscott.house.gov. You can also call our district office tomorrow at 757-380-1000. And Congressman Scott, did you have any closing comments?
No, thank you. I want to thank all of the people who participated, particularly those who were able to ask questions. We'll have more of these because obviously there were a lot of questions we didn't get to, but we're still fighting. We've been attending a lot of rallies. We've been writing questions. We've been asking questions of all of these agencies, what's going on. We have a budget coming up. Next week, we're going to determine what was going to get cut from education and workforce, and within about 2 weeks, we'll probably have a budget on the floor. Hopefully, it will not pass as in its present configuration because Medicaid and Medicare will be very much in jeopardy, along with education and nutrition programs in our committee. But we have a lot of work to do. We're still doing it, but people have asked what they can do. One of the things they can do is notice groups that are filing all these lawsuits and join and support them, because they need all the help they can get. There are a lot of different groups, including Democracy Forward, that have been filing lawsuits. If we can keep them hopping, but make sure you call your Republican friends. We need 3 Republicans in the House, and we can protect Medicaid, education funding, and everything else.
All right. Thank you, Congressman Scott, and we appreciate everyone for joining us tonight. So thank you, and everyone have a great night.